Today promises to be an incredible day filled with insightful discussions, engaging sessions, and valuable networking opportunities. Our goal is to have you leave this summit feeling rejuvenated, inspired, and equipped with the tools and ideas to bring joy back to your districts, schools, and classrooms. Throughout the day, we encourage you to actively participate in all sessions, ask questions, and share your experiences. This summit is a collaborative platform, and we value your contributions to the enriching discussions that will take place. Lastly, I want to extend our deep gratitude to our dedicated Ed Summit committee for their hard work and support in making today happen. Dr. Nat Hansuvada, Stephanie Kakuta, Crystal Majori, Cassidy McCoy, and all of our student volunteers who probably helped you get to this room today. Yay! Now I'd like to turn the mic over to our Dean of the College of Education, Dr. Anna Ortiz, who will officially welcome you to CSULB and kick off our summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. You know, I love the theme of this conference, joy. Like that kind of is something I use to characterize my life. So joy is an amazing experience, concept, emotion, goal. I really think it's a reason for living. And we're celebrating that today. And that just makes my heart warm because the joy of education, the joy of how a student looks when they're learning and feels, and when they're teaching others and helping their peers in the classroom. I mean, the joy on their face is something that just sits in my heart whenever I see it. I don't get to see it as much anymore, but I know that you all do, and I hope it brings you the joy that I remember. There's also a lot of joy in being a part of that process, right? Like we really are contributing to what is one of the most important things we can do as human beings, and that is the education and the bringing up of all of our young people. And so I think that we are also addressing, and I hope, and we kind of had Kara mention this, that I hope today we're also bringing joy into our lives through what we learn, through our interactions with our colleagues, through maybe having a moment today to just fill something up in your cup, and to really experience some renewal and rejuvenation. So I want to welcome you to the beach and the work of the Center to Close the Opportunity Gap and the College of Education. All three of those entities work very closely together to really make a difference in the education of our young people in the basin. That's why I always think about the basin. And we look forward to increasing that impact. I want to thank the NAT and the whole planning team as well. And thank all of you for taking time out of your summers, for many of you, just a couple weeks before school starts, to spend your time with us today. You bring me joy in your willingness to share your enthusiasm for our children and the teaching profession. So take time to nurture yourselves and each other today, and I wish you all the best for a successful summit.
Good morning and happy Friday. Sorry, I have a naturally loud kickboxing teacher voice. I'm Nat Hansuvada. I'm the CCOG Summit Lead. CSULB has been my home for the last 18 years. And thanks to my two daughters who are now 11 and 14, I've been involved in schools either as a PTA school board member, school site member, now a dance mom, a high school pom mom, and forever a tiger mom. But how amazing is it that we get to focus our time on joy and teaching and learning? It's about time, don't you agree? I'm so excited that the summit will help us really reclaim our focus and our energy towards centering and grounding joy today. So on that note, I'd like to say a little bit about our morning EdTalk. So the EdTalks are one of the key elements that make the summit so distinct and special. It's a great opportunity to hear directly from our fellow PK-12 teachers about what's working in their classrooms, the challenges they have experienced, and the innovative and humane ways they are helping our students learn. With that in mind, let me share with you a brief bio about our morning EdTalk speaker, Jason Lee Morgan. South Central LA native Jason Lee Morgan was a quote unquote bust kid who lived firsthand the inequities of our school system, traveling an hour outside of his community on a bus each day to receive an education that was both quality and filled with wonder. His unique experience with public schools, education policy advocacy, and systemic injustice trauma has empowered him to champion engaging and equitable learning experiences for all families, regardless of zip code or income. A 17-year teacher in the Compton Unified School District, Jason believes no child need endure what he calls joy deserts within education. I also have to mention a few accolades Jason has received. I'm not going to mention all of them. There is a lot, and you can learn more about him with his follow-up morning Ed Talk. But most recently this year, he received the Legacy Champion Educator Awardee, Outstanding Teacher of America Award, American Graduate Champion, Compton Teacher of the Year, and California League of Schools Region 8 Educator of the Year. You can also find him on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We're so excited about his Ed Talk this morning titled Joy Deserts, the Need for a Joy Revolution in Education. So please help me give a warm welcome to Jason Lee Morgan.
So I'm a servant educator, going on 18 years in Compton Unified Dominguez High School. There we go, Dominguez in the building. I want to talk about Joy Revolution and be mindful that education has always been a matter of social justice. And in order for you to be involved in it, right, you just can't be a bystander, right? You have to be a part. So I'm going to invite you guys to something that I do with all of my classrooms, which is we begin with movement. So if you can please stand up where you're at. I'm going to invite you guys to community with me today. Make sure this works. If you have a different clicker, you can click to the next slide. Next. And if I could get that clicker, that would be great. Next slide. There we go. All right. So this is a community activity, the work that we do. And this is a picture of our school here. We did a community circle mural. So all our staff and students got together and we painted this collective mural. I call this Community Joy. And one of the things that we do, the artist, Winn, he would ground us in this ritual. And so I want you guys to do this with me. And you're going to first put your fingertips together like this. And we're going to do an infinity sign or figure 8 and then a circle. Okay? And the words I'm going to give you are joy for all. And you have to breathe it out. And all for joy. All right, so let's do that together. So here we go. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Joy for all. And all for joy. All right, thank you guys. You can be seated. That way. All right, we definitely not going to finish today. Now, be mindful, though, I do have a breakout session, so anything that I don't get to, we can get into the nitty-gritty of it. Next slide. There we go. All right, so my topic is Joy Deserts, the need for a joy revolution in education. And my aim is to persuade you of the essentiality of joy for all in the educational landscape, joy for all. And I want to pose an overarching challenge that we face in that effort and point to where we might direct our energies in the coming year and perhaps instill a sense of hope in the revolutionary pursuit of joy for all. Next slide. And like I said, we definitely won't finish. All right. So I'm going to start off with the human context. So the human context, I say this is a journey of joy, and that journey is a tale of shadow and light. So this is my beautiful, next slide. That's my beautiful wife. She's also right there too, live in the flesh. Round of applause. And then my beautiful family, my son Lucas, daughter Aurora, and then baby Zay. The last two are two pandemic babies. All right. But our journey to this blessed destination was actually riddled with struggle. Next slide, or give me that clicker. So that's Lucas. That was our unlikely son. And we were told that we wouldn't be able to have children. And we're both Christians, so we just decided to wait on God and see what happened. And there we go. All right. Actually, next slide. All right. About to take y'all to church. All right. And so that's Lucas. Dwight Morgan, he joined us in 2017. Next slide. Don't sound weird saying next slide every. And the village rejoiced. And then 2 years later, we were pregnant again, the year of our 5th anniversary. But shortly, if you can click ahead, shortly before our anniversary, we had a miscarriage. That's the sign that we keep at our house, our footprint. Just remember Gracie with us. Next slide. And the village mourned. We learned how to heal together as spouses and parents. We entered a season of fear and then courage. By the end of 2019, we were pregnant again. And on June 26, 2020, Princess Aurora Joy Morgan, born in a quarantine hospital in the height of the pandemic. Her name, Aurora Joy, means dawn joy or break of day joy. It serves as a reminder for us that weeping may endure for a night, but a shout of joy comes in the morning. Seasons of weeping followed by seasons of rejoicing and back again. A year later, at the start of distance learning, Jenny's brother passed, Uncle Derek Ryan Godot. He would not see the fruit of the news that we had received only months prior. The news that he would be an uncle thrice over. On December 16th, 2021, Zayden Ryan was born in a quarantine hospital. His middle name in honor of his late uncle, another little king for our lost king. And the village rejoiced again. Next, and in the midst of it all, we're also dealing with all of this. Pandemic, COVID, quarantine again. We had a fire at the house flooded multiple times. We were displaced, multiple health problems, MRIs, ERs, PT, oh my, smoke damage. All of that was going on. And next slide. And I was also teaching. And when I say teaching, I mean all of this. Next slide. Oh, well. Teachers wear multiple hats. So I just want to take a moment and tell the teachers, thank you guys for your service. Next slide. Next slide. If everybody can put their hands over their heart, feel your heartbeat. Take one deep breath in with me. And release. That is our collective humanity. What is often left out of the story of educators and young learners is that at any given institution of learning, we are continually cycling between a vast spectrum of defeat and victory, a constant ebb and flow of trial and triumph, and no one can opt out. Students learn in this cycle, teachers teach in this cycle, admin lead in it, counselors counsel in it, custodian service in it, parents parent in it. We are all in it. It is our shared human reality, a continual battle to cultivate joy or diminish it. The question I pose today is, will we do this in our school communities? Will they experience that common human reality in ecosystems of oasis or drought? Next slide. Will it be in joy deserts or joy havens? Wellness matters for teaching and learning. How do you make room for joy in your work? Here's what I do. Slide. Since the start of my career, I've been obsessed with the complexities of school climate and culture. I try to craft educational spaces, communities, and classrooms that are so enjoyable, welcoming, meaningful, and productive that it makes anyone who enters this space say, man, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. So what does that look like? As an ally, I partner with ED and nonprofit organizations on campaigns aligned to the mission for service to communities of color. Next slide. And as an advocate, I have served as a Teach Plus Policy Fellow, Ed Trust West Advisor, working on policy briefs, Senate bills on schools climate surveys, and an Ed Summit in Sacramento on teacher diversity. Next slide. But by far, my favorite role is as educational activist. I need to be there with the people. And I operate in this capacity in a number of ways: joy communities, classrooms, and spaces. So this is what movement in mathematics looks like. Math trauma is real. So folks can actually deal with a lot of anxiety when it comes to mathematics. But if you can get them to connect on a deeper level, just as humans, you can really kind of build those social emotional learning skills by creating this environment in every single subject, especially in math. We want to help with memory retention. We can take notes, but why not download the notes into our body as well? The body is a great tool that we oftentimes don't utilize when it comes to learning. And so students then start internalizing the content through their body. So you can teach content through movement. You can build connections through movement. Oftentimes, if you want to work in groups, if people aren't gelling, they're not connecting, they don't even know how to begin conversations for conflict resolution, getting them to play and move kind of naturally forces those things to grow within the students.
I love that the pedagogy gives me a sense of family among my classroom. I only feel this in Mr. Morgan's class, and it helps me approach everyone in the classroom like we're neighbors or friends.
Honestly, there should be more teachers teaching this, because I feel as if there's too much of the same going on in most classes, and this is something completely different. It's really nice to come in here and learn new things and apply them to the real world as well, because not everything you learn in the classroom you can bring outside.
We created this fellowship called the SEND Fellowship, Student Empathy Network for Diversity, where we partner students from different communities, and they participate in, integrated collaborations where we can build empathy between these, communities that are traditionally kind of segregated from one another. The CFP Legacy Award is going to go a long way in helping fund our SEND program to be able to sponsor our movement-based activities and collaborations, ropes training courses to kind of bring these two groups together so that we can foster a greater community. Just being mindful that there's so much more that you can do with education if we involve more senses. The more senses that we can use, the more deep learning opportunities we can create. The body is a learning tool that is greatly underutilized. So be courageous, get creative, get the kids up and moving. I also work to create communities that are rooted in joyful connections. One of those communities is the Student Empathy Network for Diversity. You can click that. And so from that sparked the SEND program. So it's a Student Empathy Network for Diversity, where we take students from Dominguez High School here in Compton and we pair them up with students from another school, and we see how could we bring them together and create this kind of culture of empathy where we can understand each other on a deeper level, but using the power of movement, play, and sport to bring us all together.
Today, we gathered some students from Marshall High School and some students from Dominguez High School and their parents and friends, and we did a hike together. Because if you know anything about Send Mr. Morgan, one of his big ideas is that exercise and movement really brings people together.
We did a hike, we did a scavenger hunt, and we're just spending time with different communities and just being together. My favorite part has to be the scavenger hunt. I think that was cool. We got this big walk you can see behind us, and walking downhill, getting to know just the different people, and I think that was the best part.
If you're coming up with a crazy idea, you want someone just as crazy as you to collaborate with.
One of the things I hear from my students a lot when they leave Dominguez High School is they'll go into a college situation and they'll drop the Compton name, and there's a reaction to it. They feel like they're coming at the world at a deficit because they're from Compton, where I think the exact opposite. I think they're coming with a plus, and I wish they knew that. And I think one of the things about the SEND program that Morgan and I are trying to do is we're really trying to let them see what they are bringing to a community by all their experiences, by their creativity, by their problem solving. All the things that they have learned to do are assets to them, and Compton is an asset. It's not a deficit.
I enjoyed really socializing and getting to know my peers better. It feels as if we're talking to students from our own school, like we're all just from the same campus. Like Max from an Orange County high school.
I've sort of been doing stuff with a lot of kids from Compton I for years and years and years. But I think this is really cool because I haven't necessarily talked like personally as much with them. And I think especially with like Michael, for instance, it's been really nice to get to know that we have a lot of similar interests. I've talked with him a lot about college and we want to go into, and it's really interesting to see that we're all trying to pursue the same stuff.
There's assets and strengths in these marginalized communities that we don't always tap into. And so I wanted a program that can kind of highlight those assets and bring these communities together. And so for the grant, I was able to use the money to be able to fund a series of workshops that are centered in movement, play, and sport, all kind of centered in this frame of equity, community, and inclusion and diversity. And those students then use their experience to inform policy within education and to give back to their community using the power of movement, play, and sport.
My favorite part of the trip has been seeing nature and being able to be with other students and making new friends.
I also work to reimagine physical spaces. So when you go into my classroom, it doesn't look like a typical math classroom. It's been designed for creating a sense of belonging, culture, creativity, identity, joy, and play. So even though you might not get to visit the classroom, I want to give you a little bit of a tour. Our class is a little bit different. You may not necessarily recognize it as a math classroom. This is our lounge area. All right, this is our play space. If you see behind me, this is where the kids play with their lessons, where the learning takes place. And over here we have our message board where we have sticky notes of kind of reminders of our identity, what matters to us, and what pushes and motivates us to do better. And then we have the cafe here because everybody needs to eat. Sometimes the days get rough and you need that energy to give you a little bit of a boost. Welcome to our prototyping cart. Our class is very hands-on, so we need lots of tools to be able to create and make. And we focus a lot on fitness here. So you'll see the little yoga mats. You'll see workouts when we do actually physical warm-ups where we get up and stretch, loosen up the body, loosen up the mind. And we are under construction here. So we have one of my former students painting a mural to kind of help with the aesthetics of the space. And the idea is that when you walk into this classroom, that you are jarred and you understand that this is a place where we do things different to help you discover and dream about what's possible, not just what is, but what's possible, and then what part do you play in making it happen. All right. Thank you guys for coming to visit virtually here. And I look forward to one day meeting you all in person. Stop by anytime. Mr. Morgan, room H5. Take care. Deuces. So why do I care so much? You can go to the next ones if it's not going to play. So reason I care so much is really rooted in my own background. Yes, I used to have hair. That's my offering to education, my hair. I was born in South Central Los Angeles. I attended 52nd Street Elementary School, which is on 52nd and Hoover in South Central. And one day, my mom attended a parent-teacher conference, and my teacher told her that your son is doing well, but you need to bust him out. And it always stuck with me that I had to leave my community to get a good education. And I didn't think that was fair. Like, what about everyone else who had to stay? My parents were very big motivators, guiding me and saying, hey, we have high expectations for you to go to college, even though we didn't go. And I knew when I became a teacher, I wanted to teach in a community that was like mine growing up. I wanted to serve those students who had to stay. I was able to be bussed out, but those students who stayed, what about them? I see teaching as more of a relationship, not so much as a profession, that you have the opportunity to treat this child as though they were your own child. So whatever education I would want to give to my son or daughter, that's what I'm going to give to my students.
I have the potential to achieve more. And I think that's something he really does teach us. Like, he affected me in that way.
And their success is going to be linked to them being able to navigate the classroom and navigate their unique circumstances in life.
For more stories of champions, visit americangraduate.org.
I'll talk over it, but the pictures are cool, so I want you to see that. I grew up in South Central LA, and I was a bussed out kid. I got bussed from South Central, which is black and brown, to a community in Northridge, and it was predominantly white, Jewish, and Korean. And it was a phenomenal education. But it stuck with me that when I went to a different area, my education was a lot more enjoyable and multidimensional than the school I attended in my own neighborhood. And I'm like 7, 8 trying to figure out and make sense of why that is. And I also, in high school, I was wrongly imprisoned. I was held at gunpoint by police officers. And so I was the valedictorian, and I still encounter these injustices. And I wanted to be able to go to a community where the students stayed. I got bussed out, where the students stayed, and make sure that they had access to a joy-filled learning experience no matter where they were at. So teaching is my mission, right? Work is play for me, and sometimes there were times where I did lose my joy. And to be honest with you, nobody can get that joy back for you. You will have to reclaim it and take it for yourself when that happens. Nobody's coming to save us. One of the things I like to do, I love stories. So I'm always asking questions in educational environments, visiting different schools, random strangers, much to my wife's embarrassment. It's like, you're going to keep talking to this person? I want to know about education from everyone, because the more data I can collect, the more I can kind of figure this out. So I want to share some stories of joy deserts before I define it for you. Next slide. So these are going to be true stories that I call When Joy Dries Up. Episode 1. By all accounts, this teacher enjoyed her job. She was actively engaged with her colleagues, but admin complaints about compliance with Blackboard configurations and forced transfers felt like bullying. In the midst of all that, she was caring for her dying mother, and in that dispassionate micromanagement, her mother died, leaving her jaded, saying, "I will do my job and not anything extra." Episode 2. By all accounts, this teacher enjoyed her job. But in the same year, she lost the love of her life, her father, and her mother. But that was not enough to steal her joy. No, her joy of teaching waned when administrators stripped her of her autonomy and questioned her competence, leading to her class being transferred to another teacher mid-year for the sake of testing outcomes. Episode 3. By all accounts, this teacher enjoyed her job. A veteran teacher with deep community roots, a loving wife, dedicated mother of 4 Black boys, faced challenges during the pandemic. Upon returning to the classroom, she was met with disconnected students, top-down micromanaged curriculum, removing teacher creativity, and an excessive emphasis on teaching to the test. And for the first time in her 20 years, she became withdrawn and longed to leave the profession, saying, "This is not fun anymore." The last true story is called A Cry for Liberation. Liberation does not suggest or request, it demands. When it shouts to be heard, it did not simply emerge, but it boiled over, flowing till the world around it felt the scalding heat it had long known. Finally arrived the first day of state testing. A young African-American student, Z, expressed her anger and anguish in a reflection in the early morning in the gym. This is what she wrote. Testing is depressing, like very, very depressing. Like, aren't there better things the district could be worried about? Next slide. I hate science. 5 hours of just straight depression, 8 to 12 and nothingness. The parents, unenroll your children out of public school. They treat us like we're test rats. Teach your children real things like how to file taxes, about the stock market, about credit. We don't need to know about mitosis. Calm down, science teachers. We don't need to learn how to decode old English terminology a little bit. To school, teach us something real if you're going to keep us here for 8 hours a day, because we learning a whole bunch of nothing. I like how she switched it up too. This is actually a very bright student. She's like being real. All right, next slide. Now let's switch to stories of joy oasis. This series of joy school profiles, I call this When Joy Thrives. These are not stock photos, by the way. This is my son's TK in Wonder Academy. Next slide. First profile, Annalise Schools in Laguna Beach. I got to tour this school with some parents and they said, can I go to school again? Next slide. Let me show you why they said that. You click the video. And in this profile, I have 3 different schools to show. We're not going to go through all of them. But this is a magical place. They have a tree growing in the middle of their lobby, y'all. I go there, I'm like, this is Wonderland. This Peter Pan's going to pop out. Their education is phenomenal. The space is phenomenal. The kids, the teachers. I'm not going to be able to show the whole video, but just look at it. And you can feel and sense joy oasis. Next slide. And there are multiple schools like that. One of my favorites is the Nueva School. It's an independent school up north. And then there's even a free public charter school, Phoenix Modern. And they focus on imagining a community of learners driven by an innate sense of wonder where children experience joy and loving relationships. A neuroscience-driven school with entire pages on their website dedicated to their 4 values. And notice, wonder, love, joy, and growth. That's the language that they get. I don't know where you went. All right, I have to close, right? And so I noticed in my travels that there's this joy equity gap. Next slide. I noticed that some communities were being ruled by fear and the pursuit of performance, and some were being ruled by freedom and the pursuit of joy. And I learned that where fear abides, joy deserts thrive. And so we are in need of a revolution. You can go through 2 more slides. Next. And next. So as I come to a close, right? That's my time. There's a lot more. So if you want to come to a breakout session, you can. A joy desert is similar to a food desert. It's defined as a localized space where access to and engagement with human-centered experiences that enliven and edify the soul with gladness and delight, i.e. joy, are absent, infrequent, and or under assault. And when they're in education, it's the observed social equity phenomenon where certain school communities disproportionately have limited or endangered access to joyful teaching and learning experiences. Where if you go to an oasis, these things are flourishing, they're celebrated, and they're frequent. That is an injustice. What is getting in the way of joy equity for all? And then what can we do to start a joy revolution to make sure that every child has access to a joy oasis? Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Brent Ducor, and it's an incredible pleasure to be here today. This is our second summit, and every summer we look forward to the opportunity to be a part of the CCOG network. We've been with the CCOG group for over 3 years now, and we're also happy to announce the development and launch of our own center here at San Jose State, which is going to be a collaborative, we hope, with CCOG for many years to come. It is a great pleasure to be able to present today an important piece of the puzzle and story of the growth of California systems of support as they continue to work with our foster youth across the state to bring powerful outcomes and positive impacts on the lives of these children and young people. Today's presentation is going to be called, or is technically going to deal with, students in foster care, what districts can do to leverage resources and make a difference. And we have an esteemed colleague here, one of the top people in the state, to really give us insights. And very quickly, I'm going to turn it over to the experts in the room. But I want to thank everybody today again for this opportunity to collaborate between San Jose State and CSU Long Beach. It's how we get things done, and we're very proud to be a part of this. We are the moderators here for you today. I am the center director for IAP, but I'm very, very glad to be here with my colleague, Dr. Lori Capizzi, who is a center co-director and an expert on foster youth herself. Dr. Capizzi has worked for over 20 years in this field at San Jose State in the preparation of professionals who are ready to support, work with, and empower foster youth to be a part of our California school reforms. And she is going to moderate for us today a discussion with Michelle Lustig. So without further ado.
Thank you, Brent. So we wanted to have this webinar really to address the challenges that K-12 students in foster care face, as well as best practices for districts to support the well-being and academic success of this high-need population. So this is a bit of our description of what we're going to do. We're going to have some reflections from our expert, Dr. Michelle Lustig, on how school policy can positively impact these youth. So we're going to have a little bit of, I'm going to introduce who Michelle is. We're going to have some guiding questions, and we're going to hear from Michelle and hopefully answer some of your questions. Hang on just a minute. All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of background. our distinguished presenter. So Dr. Michelle Lustig. She is the program director for the Foster Youth Technical Assistance Program for the Los Angeles County Office of Education. This grant-funded program provides support to California's county offices of education and ensures all foster youth services coordinating programs statewide have the supports that they need. Dr. Lustig is also the president of Foster Horizons, a consulting firm focused on increasing cross-system collaboration and increasing awareness of the impact of trauma. Previously, Dr. Lustig served as the director of Foster Youth Services Coordinating Program and Homeless Education with the San Diego County Office of Education. While in that role, she created nationally recognized programs, including programs that support and increase school stability and academic outcomes for students in foster care. Under her leadership, a model interagency database was developed that allows secure access to health and education data for children under the jurisdiction of the juvenile court in San Diego County. In addition, she spearheaded the creation of a countywide cost-sharing transportation agreement that ensures students in foster care are able to remain in their school of origin. She has over 30 years of experience in public and private child welfare research and education. Dr. Lustig has served as part-time faculty at the USC School of Social Work and at the Cal State University San Marcos School of Education. She has worked for the Child and Adolescent Services Research Center, San Diego County Health and Human Services Agency, Child Welfare Services, and Casey Family Programs. Dr. Lustig believes that educational attainment is the gateway to a successful life and works to ensure that every student she serves has the opportunity to fulfill his or her academic potential. Thank you, Michelle, for being here. So we have a couple of guiding questions for Michelle. And we know that students in foster care are one of the most vulnerable student populations. Exposure to trauma, instability, and disconnection from family and community make it challenging for them to succeed in school. Likewise, schools and districts struggle to identify students in foster care as well as their needs. So our first question is, what can schools do to collaborate with and support students in foster care and their stakeholders, including caregivers, educational rights holders, placing agencies, and other supporters? What can they do? The second question, guiding question that we have, really we want to preface it with the Every Student Succeeds Act, as well as longstanding education law in California, provides significant entitlements to students in foster care. California Education Code also provides for the foster youth services coordinating programs, which provide extensive supports. So our second guiding question for Michelle is, what are the most important considerations for school site and district staff when determining how to meet the needs of students in foster care? So thank you, Michelle, again for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor. And I want to thank everybody who took the time out of their day and who chose this session and who see our students in foster care as an important subgroup of students that they want to know more about and understand how to better address the needs of. These are a group of kids that sometimes are invisible until something comes up and folks are scrambling to figure out why they're seeing what they're seeing or why a kiddo is struggling. And so having some foundational knowledge, putting some upfront thought into who these kiddos are and how it is that we can work together to support them is a really important step in the right direction. And the state of California has been really at the forefront of identifying who children in foster care are in schools and addressing their needs, including, as Lori's mentioned, a whole array of very, very deep entitlements. And I'll touch on a few of those today, but I'm going to encourage you to sort of follow some of the recommendations we'll talk about and look further at how really you can do your best at supporting them. So the first thing to do is to really use the vehicles that are already in place in California, primarily your LCAP. So your local control accountability plan has to address different subgroups of students and define how your district and school sites are going to meet the needs of those different subgroups of students. And those are your students in special ed, students who are English learners, and students in foster care. And your LCAP has to be explicit about what those supports are, what funds will be dedicated to those supports, and really how your LEA will be working to increase outcomes and close that opportunity gap for students that are in those vulnerable subgroups. So the most important thing to consider when you're including students in foster care in your LCAP is who are the stakeholders, because it's not just mom and dad. You want to be talking to the biological family of children who are system involved and involved in foster care, but there are a whole array of other adults that are pretty non-traditional stakeholders for our student populations. So these are kids who have social workers and attorneys and court-appointed special advocates and caregivers who may be foster parents or relatives or group home providers, STRTP, short-term residential treatment programs. They're not the people that schools generally are asking for input about what their students need. So engaging with those stakeholders is incredibly important. And your foster youth services coordinating program can be really helpful with getting you connected with those folks, as can your AB 490 foster care liaison, which each school district in California has to have. So knowing who that person is really important too. Second to that, consider when you are providing supports, providing home-based supports or supports in the community, not only supports that are at the school site. Children in foster care have a lot of demands on them, as do the folks caring for them. They are having visits with siblings, visits with biological family. They are having court dates. They are in caregiving settings where there are multiple children, often with doctor's appointments, therapy appointments, all kinds of things going on. Getting to a service or a support like tutoring, for instance, or staying late at school and being picked up separately can be really, really challenging for our kids. So if you can get them into after-school programs, then that might help so that they can access services there. A really, really important consideration is having a really fluent understanding of the impact of trauma, understanding how to have a school site and school district be trauma informed and trauma responsive. I strongly recommend that every school district in California look at the neurosequential model that is being supported by Bruce Perry and his efforts. If you want, I can certainly provide direct links to that information after so that you can all have that, but it's available online. It's incredibly affordable for schools and allows you to really understand how the brain works, why children are not able to engage, and really gives you a concrete way to understand why first we have to have a child feel safe. Then we have to build a relationship with that child, and then we can access the part of their brain that's the thinking brain. Really important that everybody understand that. Look really closely at your discipline policies. If you are still using push-out discipline policies, you are literally telling your students in foster care that they're not wanted. And that's a message they've received over and over and over again in their lives, unfortunately. And so to the extent that you can address behavior as a school must, but allow that to happen in an inclusive, relationship-based setting within your school campus, that's going to make a lifetime of difference for those children. Push out discipline policies really disproportionately affect our children in foster care, who also are disproportionately children of color. So we want to be really thoughtful about our discipline policies. And then be thinking about transportation plans to school of origin. How are we going to help kids have school stability? LCAPs are a fabulous place to be considering that and writing those kinds of policies in, as are all of these other ways that we can address the needs of kids. I think we can go to the next slide. I did just want to say that if you're putting any questions in the Q&A, and if because of time we don't get to them, I will commit to answering every question and getting those answers back to you and working with the moderators to ensure that you get the answers that you need. The next opportunity, or the next way that we can really make sure that we are understanding the needs of kids in foster care and that we are addressing those needs, is a training opportunity. And I know that in any school district and at any school site, training hours are minutes that are so valuable, and it's so hard to prioritize everything that you need to know in order to support your entire school community. We're not deaf to that. We absolutely understand that. But there are all types of information and supports and trainings available through your county office of education, through the foster youth services coordinating program. They literally are in place to ensure that you have everything you need in terms of content, training, materials, access, so that you can support this student population. And that is their one and only reason for being, is to be at the center of all of the adults in the life of the student in foster care and make sure that they each get what they need. So please develop that relationship. They have teams of people in many county offices. In small jurisdictions, it may only be one or two, but they are very well connected with the entire community and really doing amazing work. Again, as I said earlier, you each in your school districts have someone identified in California Education Code as your AB 490 foster care liaison. That person is entrusted and designated by your superintendent to ensure that every student in foster care has access to all of their entitlements. And those entitlements are deep. They not only have access to school of origin from the moment that they enter foster care until the moment they leave, and beyond, depending on how old they are and what grade they're in when they exit foster care, to immediate enrollment and immediate transfer of records. There are graduation exemptions that are afforded to them. There are a deep array of entitlements. They cannot be made to wait to enroll if records are missing or immunization records are not present. And so we want to make sure that our kids are having access to the entitlements that they need. And your AB 490 liaison is the point person who knows that and will be working with you to ensure that those entitlements are afforded to your students and that everybody at your school site understands that, because it's very confusing. And we all know that front office staff are overwhelmed and doing a ton of things. But this is a student population that gets special attention because it's codified both in federal law and in state law. And next is to ensure that all levels of staff have information and training. That's particularly important when we're talking about training around trauma. One of the most important things that you can do is ensure that any adult that has contact with children, all children, not just children in foster care, any child may be trauma exposed. Many, many children are from all different areas and for all different reasons. If every adult has a deeper understanding of the impact of trauma on the brain, on behavior, on development, on learning, then they will become a trauma responsive campus and one that is able to support those students instead of disciplining them. And that, when I say everybody, I don't mean only the teachers. I don't mean only designated staff in your district office or counseling staff or social work staff. I mean your front office staff, your bus drivers, your SROs, your noon duties, your paras, everybody. If everybody is having the same understanding and speaking the same language, then we don't trip each other up. Then we don't somehow disrupt the trauma responsive process that's been put in place and the empathetic process that's been put in place. And that's really important because, again, when you are attempting to help children who have been exposed to trauma learn, you have to start by helping them feel safe, and you have to next build a relationship with them. And you need to understand that that's what happens, that that's what has to happen for the brain to engage. And if someone doesn't tell you, then you just simply don't know that. So it's really important that we're doing that in our training opportunities. And last is really the opportunity to collaborate. And it's quite frankly a little bit less an opportunity and more a requirement, I think, because there are so many adults in the lives of these children, and there's so many demands on them that are unlike other children that you are working with at your school sites. Other children don't have attorneys appointed and don't get pulled out of class to talk about an upcoming hearing where they may or may not be reunified with their parents. Those court hearings don't happen right when you're doing statewide testing or while they're preparing for finals. Our kids are dealing with a whole array of different things that other students aren't. So it's really important that you know who they are and that you have access to the information that will tell you a little bit about what's going on in their lives. So hopefully you all know what CalPADS is, but it's totally possible that some of you don't, depending on what your role is, but it's a statewide data system. And several years back, California required that there be a statewide match between the Department of Social Services and the Department of Education. And that match takes place weekly. And it allows your school district, every school district, to know who their students in foster care are. That system works best when your district uploads your whole student file to CalPADS regularly. And it really works best when that information is shared with the folks on a school campus who need to know. So up until this point, CalPADS was a one-way system. You gave information to it and it stayed there. This is the first part of CalPADS that's really an information source for you. It tells you who all your kids in foster care are. It tells you who their social worker is. It tells you the date they entered care so that you know every 6 months from that date, there's a court hearing when something important might happen in their lives. Really important pieces of information. Talk to your AB 490 liaison to see if someone at your school site can have a CalPADS report and know who their kids are on a regular basis. At the same time, when you know who those kids are, do a check-in with the social worker, with the other stakeholders in their life. Make sure the emergency card is up to date. Sometimes the emergency card is out of date and it allows access to people who are dangerous to that child. That's why they entered foster care. That's an information and communication that has to take place through collaboration. Strongly recommend that you consider getting these kids, and soon it will be codified. We have a law that is about to pass that they should have priority access to any out of school time programs, before and after school programs, and summer school or intercession programs. And so that's an opportunity for children to catch up. It's also an opportunity for them to feel connected to community and school site. It's also an opportunity for them to experience stability because their caregiver has less disruption in their day and their work day to try and have someone supervise them at home. So a great way to do that. And if you are able, there are meetings. They are short notice meetings. They are called child and family team meetings, but they are when really important decisions are made in the life of a child in foster care. School site personnel, school district personnel may be invited to these meetings. And if you are, it's because you're viewed as an individual who knows the child, knows what they need at school, knows areas they may be struggling in. And so if you can participate or at a minimum provide information to the team that is facilitating those meetings, you can do this virtually. You don't have to go anywhere. You can even call in. You can contribute really important information that may have that team not move the child today and wait until the end of a grading period, or work together to create a transportation plan from the moment that the child moves so they don't miss a beat and miss any school. You can be the person who lets them know this is where their best friend is and where they are participating in volleyball or some other activity that's really important to them and has them engaged in school, or some other activity, ASB, whatever it is. You can contribute that. Other folks in their lives may not know what's going on a day-to-day basis in school. You might. So if you can participate and share that information, it would be really, really helpful. Those are just some of my thoughts. We wanted to leave time for a conversation, for any questions. And so I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to Lori and Frank.
Thank you very much. Michelle. We are so grateful for these primers and 101 insights, like get started now, make some things happen, connect some dots. That's exactly what we hope this webinar could provide. I am monitoring the chat, by the way. If anyone wants to drop a question, a query, an impression, we'll do our best to give that back to the whole community. I have a couple of thoughts, and one of the thoughts is my hat as the director of our center, as well as a professor of teacher education, is what you said right at the end. It just grabbed my attention. I know we have a lot of teacher educators, teachers in training, people who are serving as teachers at the conference this summer. You mentioned grading period, and I've just recently written a book and done some work with CCOG and webinars on how to rethink classroom assessment that really serves the needs of our children who are both experiencing trauma and who are in fact students in positions of mobility, movement, change. And so sometimes our very rigid notions of when the quiz will happen or when the homework is due or what the assignment deadline is almost circumvents the good work you're talking about, because we need to be more flexible, don't we? We need to be more, I would say, formative in our thinking about how to give feedback and assessments that help students to grow and change and develop. And I'm thinking a lot about what you're saying here with foster youth, that they really are a beacon here. If we're going to examine our assessment practices, our classroom assessment work, the feedback we give and how it's taken up and who hears it and who doesn't, we ought to be thinking about all of our foster kids, as you said, kiddos. Are they able to benefit from the kind of assessment work we're doing in the classroom? To me, that's almost an essential question based on what you said. What are some of your thoughts about how teachers can be more responsive, more engaged, not just about the trauma, but in fact about assessment and learning as well?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think you're hitting on such an important point, which is that a lot of times our kids are moving mid-semester, mid-grading period. They're catching up. They're adjusting to a bunch of different changes, and those changes may not align with the schedule that the teacher has for a quiz or an exam or a report or something else. And so really it's about, from my perspective, flexibility and compassion and being willing to have that conversation and really understand that you're not being unfair when you give that child who has experienced those things a different opportunity. You're giving them really what they need, which, goes back to old teachings about what equity really is. And being able to understand that a child may not be present because of something going on in their life and may not be able to access the information that you did teach them. It's not a reflection on you. Don't take that personally, that they can't perform in this moment, but that they might be able to if you give them another opportunity. It's so important, because the things that they are challenged by are beyond our sort of sight line. And we're not able, if no one tells us, again, we don't consider that yesterday they thought they were going to reunify with their mom and they found out that she'd relapsed, and that's not going to happen. And today they have to demonstrate what X plus Y equals, and there's no place for them to do that. So super important that we be more aware and flexible, but also use other measures, alternate measures to measure skills. Sometimes a kid might be able to tell you something in a conversation that they know and understand, but they may not be able to write it. Gaps in learning, gaps in foundation are really important. When we are stressed, when we are scared, we don't get stuff into the part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, that holds that learning. So doing remediation acceleration models are really, really important, particularly in things that build on each other, like math and those types of skills. We have so many kids failing algebra, and when you dig into it, what you learn is they don't know how to multiply decimals and fractions with known numbers. Really hard to go to unknown when in algebra, when you haven't gotten the foundation, they missed it. So kind of digging into what's underneath it is really helpful also.
Yeah, we tend to think of it here as the question of second chances everywhere, every time, every place. If I care about a science lab for one of the kids who just went to that trauma the night before because they couldn't reunite, and I'm really thinking about the whole child, then I'm finding ways to adjust to make context matter for the learning. And like you said, that's not about fairness and equity. In fact, it's the reverse. It's more equitable to provide those extensions or those redos or that rethinking, or that was your first draft, but you know what? Give yourself a little time this week to extend that thinking. I'll wait for it because I'm ready for you when you're ready to do this work. So I just think it's really about changing up our mindset. Lori, do you have any questions for Dr. Lustig? I have another one, but I want to make sure I share the love here today.
Dr. Lustig, so for a principal that wants to make, some changes that can have some impact, maybe one or two things to start, what would you suggest?
Okay. So some of my favorite things that principals have done, so it's doable. I'm not going to tell you something that's never been done. On your staff development day, the day that everybody is back, have lists of all the students. Some principals do it with photographs and they put pictures, the student pictures up on all the walls in the room that the staff are going to be in. Have your staff go around and put a check mark by every child that they know. They have a relationship with, know the name of. And then after that, take all the children who had nobody put a check mark next to their picture or their name. Have your staff do intentional outreach and connecting with those students, because those students have no adult on your campus who knows them. Therefore, they have no one on that campus that cares about them, or at least how they perceive being cared about. And build relationships and just do something simple like a daily, weekly, whatever check-in. Hey, how you doing? By their first name. Just wanted to see what you think about your classes, or you're going out on any, whatever, and start building relationships. You will see dramatic decreases in discipline, and increases in attendance and attention when children feel seen and connected. It's those simple little things that are really, really meaningful.
Thank you.
I'm just looking at the chat. I don't see anything in here yet, so we'll continue on with our dialogue with you. And I think that's also a great way for others to hear and spark some more ideas. I'm going to come in from a little bit separate angle here for a moment, partly because before I came into the world of classroom assessment and thinking about standardized tests and the role of accountability and how we think about what we measure and what counts, I had an opportunity to learn a little bit about sort of the challenges and problem of policy. California is a wonderful state for introducing innovation, but with innovation often comes stacking of policy after policy reform. And people start to wonder, how is all this stuff connected? We've got culture responsive pedagogy as a critical strand of our work. We've got ethnic studies now coming online as a critical strand of our work. We've heard today about some very powerful ways about thinking about pedagogy. And at the same time, we have these massive structural changes going on in the state. One of them is this new community schools reform, where we now see a lot of time and money and energy that's being spent in the last year or two, and going to go more and more over the next couple of years, I think, to sort of ask the question, how does Dr. Lustig's work, which is systematic, which is already touching on county offices of education, which is already rethinking LCAP and how we approach the questions without community schools. I guess my question is, how do we build in an understanding of these new reforms, charter schools, community schools, that are going to do the work you're talking about? Because really, at the end of the day, I think you've centered us on foster youth as a real beacon again, as a lighthouse. Where are we in any of these reforms on how we are serving these kids who are at promise, as we like to say, rather than at risk? Where are we with this? What's your thoughts about, how not to feel that policy crowd out feeling where everything's kind of hitting you, but you don't know where you really are anymore? How do you navigate, and what do you want us to think about in terms of feeding many birds with one seed?
Wow.
It's a big question. I'll try to hit it softball a little bit easier, maybe.
I really love the philosophy behind the community schools. movement, and I believe it will get us to a place where education is seen as the holistic home of a community, which I think is really important. And there are pockets where that's happened across the country for decades, where really schools have been where families access health and dental and mental health and whatever they need. And it changes the paradigm, changes the relationship that many communities have with schools, because a lot of our communities have really not positive recollections of their time in school. A lot of parents felt very unwanted and disenfranchised during their public education experiences, and that anxiety gets translated to their children. So when we can have it be an inclusive, welcoming, supportive place that you identify what you need as an individual and as a family and as a community, which is the goal of that effort, then folks will feel seen and heard and will feel like their children can be safe in those places, and more communities will get what they need. And that's really the goal. But how you manage all of the policy shifts, I live in the space of policy and do a lot of legislative work, saying, calling them children at promise was legislated literally a few years ago. It's codified that we don't say at risk anymore, we say at promise. How do you live there? I think you just stay focused on kids. I think the only thing that we can do is support each other, see each other as vulnerable and learning and growing and struggling, and see our children looking to us for guidance and support, and that we have to hold a space for them. If the pandemic taught us nothing else, it is that things really go to pieces when the grown-ups don't know what's coming next. Children really don't know what to do with that energy when they can't look to the adults to say it's going to be okay. And adults couldn't say it was going to be okay because we didn't know. And so to the extent that we can, the last speaker ended with, take care of yourself, that we could take care of ourselves and each other, and know that in reality, some policy shifts will come and go. Policy is words on a paper until it's enacted. And there's good policy and there's not so good policy. And then there's unintended negative consequences of some policy. And we have to ferret that out. And then go back and fix it. And talk to people like me who go back and fix it when you discover those things, and elevate those issues to those groups in our state that are doing great work, like AXA and CCESA, and are elevating problematic policies or pockets where you need policy. In this particular space around students in foster care, if you want to be engaged on a larger scale, the California Foster Youth Education Task Force is a group that is open to anybody who cares about education for kids in foster care, is a great place to bring dilemmas, problems, walls you've hit, and get solutions or get suggestions across the state. It has every level of stakeholder engaged. So that's another way to sort of muddle through it. But policy, new policy, when it's new, is just that. We don't always know how it's going to land. And sometimes it's interesting.
Lori.
So thank you, Michelle. I'm just mindful of time and want to get some more questions in here. I love Brent is so broad. He's got the policy, and I'm taking it to the ground level of let's talk advocacy now on the ground. What can folks do at the school site level to advocate for a student who may have just disclosed that they're in foster care and need some resources, say? What do you suggest how to approach and advocate?
Oh, my heart. So, I mean, I think obviously I don't ever want to say that, don't respond to a student who's in foster care differently than you would another student. I mean, they're kids. They're just kids. They have different experiences. They have much more significant challenges in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, if a child has disclosed to you, has shared with you something so personal, something that they have probably been teased about before, something that they may be embarrassed about or have a lot of feelings about, that means you're doing something right. So first of all, just know that you have proven yourself to be someone that they can confide in and trust and ask for help. It is really hard for any of us to ask for help. So if that happens, kudos, like that's a great thing. Helping to identify who the important people are in their lives that can help support them as you try and layer on what it is that they need and identify what they need. If it's stuff that has to happen outside of the schoolhouse doors or the school day or the extended day, absolutely willingness to communicate with the child's social worker, the child's caregiver, finding out who the educational rights holder is. That is not always a person that's obvious. The person who makes educational decisions for a child in foster care can be a caregiver from 2 years ago who they're still connected with, or more likely their bio parent who they no longer live with. So knowing who that person is really important, and being able to share their successes as well, so that the folks who are looking at their whole lives are getting a realistic view of what's going on with them day to day at school is really important. Those CFTs are a super important time, child and family teams, for you to do your advocacy around what a kid needs. And if they need to stay in this school, and if movement is absolutely not in their best interest, please say that loud and clear. Say why. Be explicit. Make them feel guilty at the idea of moving that child, if that's what it takes. But really try and help kids to experience stability and connection in any way that you can. And I don't, we have a lot of resources that are foster care specific because districts are using LCAP money, et cetera, but normalize their accessing those supports, have them be as similar and as accessible as they would be so that kids don't feel singled out. Kids can be mean. And so, and being very mindful about who knows that information about them and not sharing it too broadly so that someone doesn't misunderstand would be helpful.
Michelle, listening to your presentation only reaffirmed the work that Dr. Capizzi and I are doing on building interprofessional understanding. You really hit it on the nail when you mentioned all the different people who support, including the bus driver, including the custodial services person, the para. There's a whole community, an ecosystem, a village of people who make a difference every day in the life of our children that you're describing. And it makes me think a little bit about the work, Lori, that we're doing on building conversation starter modules that allow people to see across their various roles. But Michelle, I think you've really hit on even within their roles, they need to see the networks of people that are there making a difference every day for the foster youth that they serve. So maybe one of the things we can leave this discussion with is, what are those conversation modules going to look like, and how are we going to put them out there as ways to get started for people to start to see each other more clearly, and then from there get excited about the opportunity of building those informal networks. So more to come on that for sure. I just want to say that for us, it's incredible to hear from an expert of your caliber and the experience. And if it's okay with you, I think we'll begin to wind down now and close out this session. Dr. C, have I missed anything? Dr. Lustig, is there anything more you'd like to leave us with? Let us know.
I'll just, to that point, just there's that importance of relationships, and I never want to emphasize it or de-emphasize it. We use stories. You're talking about conversations. We use stories to really drive these points home. And there's a student that I worked with, and I love to share this story because she was a transgender student. She moved quite a far distance from her school of origin. She was transported back to her school of origin. So they added her on a very long bus route. And she went a very long distance, but she started every day with 20 minutes with her bus driver and ended every day with 20 extra minutes with her bus driver. And they developed a relationship. And this went on for her last 2 years of high school. And she had been a struggling student, but that was her home school. She was going to stay. And she did graduate. She graduated very successfully. And when she did, the one person she invited to her graduation was her bus driver. And the bus driver went. And subsequently, the bus driver walked her down the aisle. And so you can't diminish the significance of stability and relationship and connection. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what role you play. Any of us can be that person that lets that child know they matter, and then they'll persist and succeed.
Beautiful. Incredible way to wrap this session up.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. Hopefully you are really enjoying these conference sessions. I am just going to kick us off here right at the 11:30 start time and want to invite you as you enter this space. The chat has been enabled. I'd love to hear from you. If you would just please pop into the chat your name, your role, and maybe your region or where you're zooming in from today. Maybe some of you are on campus, some of you are joining from home, but would love to just take a moment to get an idea of who is with us today. And then we'll dive into talking about understanding trauma in schools, which is the session that you have all logged into. So let's take a moment in the chat to just share a bit about who we are, and then we'll get started. Awesome. We've got teachers from Torrance and Bakersfield, principal, social worker joining us. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. And if for some reason the chat isn't working for you, feel free to use that Q&A function and get an idea of who is in the room, name, role, region, and then we'll dive in. Thanks for being here. Awesome. Counselor, we've got a good group. Social worker. If you're just now joining, we are taking a moment to introduce ourselves in the chat. There's going to be some opportunity for interaction today as we look to understand trauma in schools. Give folks a little bit more time. And as you are doing that, I'm going to give us our agenda for the next 45 minutes that we're going to be together. We are really thinking about trauma. So we're going to start by really complicating the idea of trauma. And many of you in this room likely come to this space with an awareness and understanding of what it means and what trauma is. So we're gonna add some layers to the idea and then introduce some frames for really thinking about understanding trauma in schools. And finally, we will have an opportunity to really apply and practice these frames, thinking about our students, but also ourselves. You are invited at any time to pop questions into the Q&A, to use the chat as much as makes sense. I'm going to invite some interaction. We've got a little interactive Jamboard that we're going to do together as well. So thank you for being here. And also just want to give a reminder and kind of just a blanket opening statement that, you know, anytime we talk about complex topics like trauma, things can really come up. And so not that we're going to be asking to disclose anything about traumatic experiences today, but obviously thinking about the topic alone can really bring up a lot of feelings and emotions for people. And so I want to just start by having us acknowledge that this is not an easy thing. This is not just information for many of us. This is a very real and personal experience, and that we can take what we need. So, throughout the session, if engaging is too much or, not an option for you, you're welcome to just sit and listen to what others might be sharing. If you need to, get up, walk around, eat, drink, do whatever makes sense as we talk about this. So thank you all for introducing yourselves in the chat. Very grateful to be here with you today. I want to give you a little bit of my background. So my name is Addison Duane, and I am an elementary teacher by trade. I taught in Sacramento, Northern California for 6 years, and then also served as a site instructional coach and new teacher mentor in the district. My master's degree is in curriculum and instruction, and my PhD is in educational psychology, where I studied many of the trauma-informed practices that I'm going to be talking about today. And in my free time, I really love to do puzzles and drink good coffee and hang out with my niece and nephew. I'm also a postdoctoral research scholar at UC Berkeley now, looking at the intersections of trauma-informed practice and social and emotional learning. So it's a bit about me, and excited to be here with you today. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about what is trauma. And, I've been to, as you can imagine, many of you likely have as well. This is a buzzword in education right now, some may say. And trauma has been defined in many different ways, and it means different things to different people. And so rather than introducing just a single definition that we can all agree on, I'd like to complicate it a little bit. I'd like to invite us to engage with many different definitions of trauma. And also say that we know that research has found that when we explicitly train educators in this idea of trauma-informed practice or understanding trauma and its effects, looking at trauma in schools, that it can actually improve teachers' awareness of the topic, and then also have important impacts for the students that they serve. And so we know that being trauma-informed is much more than the mindset shifts. There is no checklist. I'm not here to give you a checklist today, but it always has to start with an awareness and an understanding of trauma. So we're going to do that together now. And the way that we're going to do it is by engaging in this Jamboard. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat and ask you to open up that Jamboard, and I will switch my screen share here so that we can see it. And what we're going to do is, see, here we go. Okay. Unpause that. All right. So in the Jamboard, if you will click the link here that I just dropped in the chat and open up the definitions Jamboard, what you'll see is what I've done is I've compiled a lot of different definitions of trauma, because there really is no one way of thinking about this topic. If you're a counselor and you're trained in this, if you're a clinical psychologist, there may be different ways people draw in different definitions. And so what I'm going to ask us to do now for about 5 minutes is to actually engage with these different definitions of trauma by answering directly these questions. As you read all these different definitions of trauma, of how different people have thought about and conceptualized the idea, I just want you to use a sticky note on this Jamboard here on the left-hand side. You just click the sticky right there and answer these questions. You can choose one question, you can answer all three. Curious to hear what resonates with you. When you read these definitions of trauma, what comes up for you? What do you think about? What resonates in maybe your own existing definition of trauma? And then some noticings and some wonderings. What do you notice about how maybe across the definitions things are varied or how they're similar? What do you wonder about as you think about this session that's really for applying this knowledge in schools? And so I'm going to ask us now to just do a little thinking, do a little noticing, do a little wondering. I'm going to mute myself, and we're going to use the sticky notes to actually think about all these different definitions to complicate our narrative. Let's do that now. We'll take about maybe 3 to 5 minutes. We'll see how it goes. I'll check in at the 3-minute mark. All right. Thank you. Thank you. If you're still typing, invite you to add some things in. Oh, we've got a few more stickies still populating. This is great. Feel free to move them around. Yeah, lots of good stuff in here. So again, thinking about how we think about trauma, you can see that there's some variation across definitions. There's also some similarities, right? That this idea that, that trauma is the response to an event or set of experiences, right? Not the event itself. I think we sometimes can get a bit confused about, we call them traumatic events, right? But that the trauma itself is the response, and that, things like connection and control is what gets robbed is very, very meaningful for us. That's going to really align with what we're talking about today of what we can do in classrooms and in schools. Comments about the body's response to horrible things being a way to think about trauma, that, the emotional trauma can be a really severe form of trauma. Seeing structures of oppression, we have to think about adding that equity lens, that it's really a lens, speaking of which, not a label, those kids are the trauma kids, as somebody noted on that sticky note. We definitely want to avoid things like that. So these definitions are just a really good way for us to think about what is trauma and what does it mean for us then to be able to be responsive to it in schools. And so with that, I'm going to go back to sharing my slides here. Hopefully folks can see that. And so, I want to just continue to think about adding some layers to our understanding of trauma here. And to do that, I want to give you some additional resources here and some research. So again, thinking about across those definitions, we can understand that trauma is the response to an event, right? Or set of events or potential or, real or perceived experiences. And that it's really defined by the person, that it's rooted in individuals' perspectives and their perceptions of the experience. But we also know that the idea of psychological trauma has these sort of things that can contribute to whether or not something is traumatic, right? So we differentiate in psychology between stress and trauma, in that stress is something that we can really adapt to, we can cope with stressors, and that trauma is something, the experience of trauma is when we have overwhelmed our capacity to cope, right? And so things that can overwhelm or contribute to a person not being able to cope with an experience or set of experiences might be things like a person's age, their developmental stage, whether or not they've had prior traumatic experiences, whether or not they have significant family and friends and figures in their lives. We're going to talk about the presence of caring people as a really important piece of buffering trauma. It can also really depend on the event itself. The response can depend on the event, right? How frequent this experience has occurred, the duration of it, the severity, whether it was experienced alone or with others. And then we also have to think about the environmental factors too, when thinking about whether or not something is traumatic, right? The quality and quantity and accessibility of a community of care, of whether or not they have access to resources and mental health supports. Of course, the social, the cultural, the political context that surrounds individuals and communities. And as I said, the availability of the supports and the services, right? For us as educators, it's definitely less important to know the list of trauma events. Maybe some of you are familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experiences Checklist, and that is a list of originally 10, now I think it's 14 potentially traumatic events that has been tied epidemiologically to a lot of adverse health outcomes. And I really take issue with this understanding of trauma because the ACEs checklist, as they call it, is really just a list of whether or not something has happened to you. And as we saw in those trauma definitions, it's more than just what happened to you, it's your response to it. And again, the duration, the frequency, whether or not there were people around you. ACEs doesn't ask any of that. There's no follow-up. There's no, sort of qualitative inquiry alongside of it. And so for us in the classroom, I always bring it back to like putting my teacher hat on. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for me tomorrow when I'm teaching fractions to fifth graders? And oftentimes what I land on, and in community with lots of other folks who have done good thinking about this, is really that it's important for us to understand what trauma is for sure, and to really see potential impacts, right? To think about how might trauma show up in my classroom and in my school. So this may be very common knowledge, you may be familiar, but I want to go through how trauma can manifest in individuals and in ourselves, so that we can be more aware when we are looking to understand behavior or looking at things like chronic absenteeism, right? We may want to take this trauma-informed lens, not label, to be thinking about what this could mean, right? So trauma immediately can produce all sorts of anxiety, increased fear and worry. We often talk about hypervigilance, constantly scanning for potential threat is a very, very real symptom of trauma. We could see changes in behavior. We can see really extreme hyperactivity. We can see a lot of hypoactivity, which is where, two ends of the spectrum, right? We have a lot of really kind of like Energizer Bunny activity, and then also hypoactivity, which is very, falling asleep a lot in class and unresponsive and lethargic can also be a trauma response. We might see changes in the way that they're performing at school. As I said, absenteeism, not coming, especially if the trauma may have originated in school itself. A really frequent one that I saw in my classroom a lot, working with students who were experiencing a lot of trauma, was somatic complaints. Kids complaining of things like headaches and stomach aches chronically, may be tied to trauma. A lot of things about thinking about morbidity, death and dying, difficulty with redirection, with authority. There may be some re-experiencing symptoms where they could bring up disturbing memories during the day in the classroom. Oftentimes, if you are a safe adult to that child, you'll find that they will disclose things to you very matter-of-factly, right? They'll just start talking about something that happened. Maybe that same hyperarousal. And then we also may see things like avoidance behavior, and emotional numbing, seeming to have no feelings, that kind of stuff. So again, we want to think about the impacts of what this could look like in the classroom. And for me, when I was learning about this and wearing my teacher hat, it was really illuminating to think about some of the challenges that I was having with individual students or groups of students being tied to trauma rather than overt defiance, or, they're doing this on purpose, right? And I think it's also important for us to think about it as sort of this tree of how trauma might show up in our classroom. So this is just a visual that I've created when talking to educators, that perhaps the root of the responses might be trauma. Now, we don't want to assume, but it could be that there's some trauma that has occurred. And we see in the literature, we see that research has found that there are kind of these three domains of trauma responses that students may be experiencing or demonstrating. So we've got those emotional responses that I just talked about, the physical, the somatic complaints, and then the behavioral responses. Now, it would be one thing for us to just leave it here and to say, oh, we can understand that, trauma is something that happens and can result in a lot of different responses and manifestations in the classroom. But for me, much of the research that I do is also really drilling down beneath the surface to really think about what are the origins of the traumatic experiences that individuals and children especially are experiencing. So we would add an equity lens to that and really think about systems of oppression, as someone named in the Jamboard. Thank you for setting us up perfectly for that. So thinking about, yes, trauma is something that occurred. There was, a horrific incident or set of experiences that happened. And we can almost always tie whatever that traumatic experience was to the roots of that in being, tied to some form of inequity or oppression, right? So things like systemic racism, racial trauma, experiences of discrimination being very traumatic for individuals of color, and knowing that that's not necessarily just an interpersonal, but that also is rooted in this kind of pervasive systemic racism that exists, right? We can also look at things like, there's lots of things about poverty that can cause trauma. We don't consider poverty as a marker of trauma. We don't poverty is not synonymous with trauma in the literature, but we can think about the conditions of poverty as being incredibly traumatic: housing insecurity, food insecurity, homelessness, right? And those things, even we can drill down to the roots of those as well, right? We can think about how homelessness or housing insecurity could be tied to a history of redlining, of ensuring that certain neighborhoods in cities had less access to home loans, or, to some of the environmental traumas that we're seeing, like wildfires and floodings, being tied to communities having to build houses in unsafe spaces, right? I could do a whole talk on the origins and the roots of trauma, but I just wanted to add this layer again, as we're thinking about what is trauma and we're looking at a child who might be talking to us about something that happened to them. We can also, again, take that lens to dig a bit deeper and think about, what are the underpinnings, what are the roots of even that traumatic experience, to go beyond just seeing individuals, but to see systems on the whole. So with that, we're going to introduce a few frames for understanding. Then we're going to get to what the heck do we do in our classrooms. So in my work, I really think about how to frame the idea of trauma. And one of the things that is incredibly pervasive, I finished a study in 2021 where I looked at trauma-informed teachers and how they talk about students. And one of the most pervasive findings in that research was that educators are frequently using something called a deficit frame. And this is the idea that teachers especially were talking about kids with trauma by defining them by their problems, their deficiencies, their dysfunctions, and pathologies, right? They were saying, those are the trauma kids, or, oh, they're so sad. They're so, they can't function. They can't do anything right, right? Deficit frames really ask what's missing, what can I fix, what do I need to go find? And it's really rooted in assumptions. We want to shift away from deficit framing when thinking about trauma in our schools to taking up these asset frames, these and structural frames, as I just sort of spoke about, right? This idea that we can start by defining the students in our classrooms by their contributions and their strengths before anything else. Now, the thing about asset and structural framing is really not saying, let's ignore the deficits, let's ignore the trauma. In fact, that would be a really dangerous thing to do, right? We want to make sure to see the full child and to be responsive to what's happening. And we also can start with what is good, right? What's present that we can build on, and what systems might be creating this problem, more than seeing the individual as deficient. And we can also think about widening our view and thinking about how schools themselves can be sites of trauma for children. And so I think a lot of times, especially in the research I did looking at educator discourse, a lot of teachers said children bring so much trauma with them to school. They come in, it's this invisible backpack, it's the monster at the school door. They think about all the trauma that individuals are bringing from home, from their community, and they list all of these things happening outside of schools. But if we're going to use an equity lens, an asset lens, and a structural lens, we also really need to interrogate our own role, right, in the re-traumatization or sometimes traumatization of children in schools. So we know from research, and in my dissertation, this is what I studied, the prevalence of school-based trauma for elementary school students in a Midwestern city. We know that schools really can be sites of trauma for many. And so we found that by the age of 9 in 3rd grade, children on average, this was a really giant sample that we took from, had an average of 4 traumatic events happening at school. So by the time they are in 3rd grade, 4 traumatic things have happened to them at school. And so we want to also think about that, right? When we're seeing these trauma responses, when we're seeing the impacts that we just explored together, we don't want to assume that it's because something at home has happened and that's the only thing we can think about, right? We want to also interrogate what's happening in my classroom. What was my response just now? What interactions on the playground or at lunch or in study hall may be happening that are also either causing or perpetuating some of the trauma that students may be experiencing. And as I said in that study, we also found, really importantly, that for elementary school students, the origins of the trauma exposure for many of the children, trauma was the first site. Schools were the first site of trauma for youth, which really pushes against that idea of the like invisible backpack monster at the school door, that actually kids were coming from homes that didn't have a lot of trauma and then experiencing them in the schools, which is really important for us to think about, right? As we think about, again, what's as teachers or educators, what's our sphere of influence? What does it mean for us to be trauma informed? We have to start with ourselves. We have to understand that trauma. And we have to look around our own spaces and see where might trauma already be present in the school. All right. So we've done a lot of readying ourselves, really thinking about what does it mean to understand trauma, to see it in our schools themselves. And I am doing a really high level of all of these things, just given the time that we have today, but grateful to really dig into this. Let's now talk about the so what now, right? In about the last 10-ish minutes or so, we're going to dig into what does it really mean for us to be trauma informed, for us to enact some of the research-backed things that we know can help reduce the impact or buffer the impact of trauma. So I want to just say that I think I mentioned this already. Trauma-informed practice is amazing because there isn't actually a checklist. There is no one right way of doing things. Instead, being trauma-informed really asks us it invites us to ask, how is trauma present and how can I be responsive? How can I resist that re-traumatization? So one of the research papers that I love to reference is this piece that really talks about how trauma-informed practice is not a drastic change. This is not a radical, I need to restructure everything that I'm doing, but actually that it's in bringing awareness to these everyday small actions of educators that can actually have a really profound effect. So I'm not going to ask you to completely restructure the entirety of your school, but there are actually a lot of things that we can do to be responsive to the trauma that our students might be experiencing, or even that the adults in our spaces or ourselves might be experiencing. So the very first one, and if you've been to anything that's connected to trauma-informed practice, you know this is coming, is to prioritize connection. More than anything else in the research and in people's lived experience, we know that connection, relationships, social support is the main buffer of trauma and stress. That when there is the presence of even one caring person in another human's life, that serves as a moderator of the trauma and the stress response in our bodies. So relationships, social support, connection, these things really matter more than anything else. And it's really hard sometimes in a system that is asking us to do so much. There's nothing about state testing that allows us to prioritize connection. We have to cultivate those opportunities ourselves, right? And we also have to think about connection a little bit differently. We can think about relationships between students and teachers, but also between students, right? Peer-to-peer connection, between other staff in the school building and between others in the community space as well. I'm so glad we have counselors and social workers here today because they serve a critical role in really being another person that child can connect with. There's also different types of connection and support, right? So oftentimes I think we think about the relationship building strategies that every teacher is trained in, as being very teacher centric, right? But there's lots of things that can count as connection, those everyday little moments that can be profound that maybe we're not thinking about. So there's that emotional support. We can just show care. When I work with youth directly in my research settings, they talk about they just want adults to know that they like to know that they're cared about, right? They'll say things like, yeah, they could just say they care about us and mean it. So emotional support could be offering care, concern, and compassion, right? Just taking up interest in some of the things that kids are interested in, spending a little bit of time just checking in, caring, can really go a long way. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, people who are doing this very well. There's also instrumental support, right? So you can provide really tangible, practical assistance as a form of connection. So things that are really easy. These are like the low-hanging fruits of if a kid needs a pencil, just allow them to have that pencil, right? Informational support is another form of connection, giving advice, offering guidance, providing additional information. Appraisal support is one that we as teachers do really well. Providing real feedback is actually a form of connection, and reassurance and evaluation in the academic products that we see. And then companionship, right? So again, thinking about between peers and other people in the school community, this is just being able to engage in shared experiences and in social activities. And so a great example of this, one that I do a lot when working with kids, but also did as a classroom teacher, was a strategy called the 2x10. You probably have heard about this, but it's the idea that for 2 minutes every day for 10 days, you take literally 2 minutes. And that could be in, walking to your specials class or in the hallway as students are leaving or coming to class, or dismissal or breakfast, whatever time you're with students, 2 minutes to spend talking to a student or a group of students about anything other than academics, anything other than grades, anything other than what's happening in class, right? You ask about YouTube videos and what they did over the weekend, just sharing experiences in a not structured academic-y kind of way, has been found to be really, really effective for, again, having students feel cared about, loved, concerned about in classroom settings. Okay. The second one is, as we talked about with that asset lens, to really think about strengths. And I'm not asking us here to think about strengths in a really Pollyanna-ish way, right? To say, oh, everything's great. Let's do toxic positivity. Let's all ignore what's hard and real in our lives. But really, actually, what this means is to think about supporting individuals, students maybe and specifically, in identifying resources, the strengths that already exist on them so that they can build on them in moments of stress and in hard moments in school, right? And so a lot of times you'll hear in the SEL research or even in trauma-informed practice, in SEL practice, you'll hear people say, teach kids coping skills. Coping skills are incredible. They are a really important thing that we want to equip individuals with. And as educators, we can recognize that we are not trained clinicians if we're teachers in the classroom, and that kids come to us many times with coping skills already, right? They've obviously made it to our classroom somehow, coping through life stressors. And so when we start with an asset lens, we view them with generosity and we say, not, I need to teach them coping skills because they have none, but instead we can say, what coping skills are already present that we can build on, right? So instead of that assumption, we build on the wealth of resources that are already inherently in them, right? And I've had some teachers say to me, well, they have bad coping skills, right? That's a fair assessment. And also we can think about building is also refining and tweaking, right? And not shaming and saying these are wrong or bad, but hey, let's add to your tool belt of coping skills rather than trying to completely replace, right? We know that kids come to us with lots of resources, so we can make them aware of those coping skills and add to the tool belt. So in my classroom, when I would introduce the idea of working through hard moments in a math problem or with a friend at recess, I would start by kind of asking kids to journal and reflect and think about in their lives, how have they already handled hard moments? And maybe for younger students, it's something about, you have to offer up ideas. Maybe you've gone to an adult to ask for help. Maybe you've spent time alone in your room. Maybe you have a stuffed animal you love. But older students and definitely adults can really talk about how they've coped. And then you can really open up space for people to share, right? And so you can think about folks kind of building out their tool belt in a community circle or in a writing moment during class to think about expanding their coping skills. So we can think about coping skills and instructing, but again, starting with those strengths, right? Thinking about how humor is a really positive coping skill. Now, oftentimes we see that as like defiance and class clown, but actually humor is an incredibly useful coping skill. Things like reframing cognitively and meaning making of situations in different ways, being able to communicate and talk things out, right? There's also things like problem focused coping, where you're thinking about planning and sometimes suppression. You need to reduce the stressor in the moment. Also, things like physical coping. You'll see kids just like go sprint around the yard or, shut down, fall asleep. All of those can be seen as coping skills. And then when we start with strengths to build on, in that building piece, we can think about context, right? Where are coping skills appropriate? How can we use them? And what does it mean for us in a classroom community that really is there to learn and to grow? And how can we kind of embed those into the routines of our school day? And then last but not least, we want to just think about starting small. As I said, those everyday activities, the profound tiny moments are the things that really plant the seed long term. And so when we're connecting with kids, when we're seeing strengths in students, we also have to trust the process, right? Being trauma informed means that things aren't going to shift overnight, right? Understanding trauma and its effects is a shift we can see in ourselves and plant the seeds in ourselves and know that sometimes it takes a long time for those shifts to occur, right? And it can be small, those seeds that you're planting in those tiny everyday moments. It could be just connecting with students at the door, or doing the 2x10 on the way to lunch, or talking about feelings when you're reading a read aloud during ELA. Oh, she used a coping skill here. Let's talk about that, right? It could just be acknowledging our own stress in the moment, right? Not in a shaming way, like, you all are stressing me out, but gosh, I have a lot on my plate today. I'm sure others can understand. I'm going to take some deep breaths, right? So as we wrap up here, I just want to acknowledge that, we are all gardeners in our own ways, planting these seeds. And I would love to just, in the last 5 minutes, I was hoping to get to the case study, but I think this is a good spot to end it. I've offered a lot of information already. I would love for us to just open up the chat and hear from folks about what you do in your space, whether that's in your classroom, in your, counseling office, in your social work room, in your principal's office. What do you do maybe to prioritize connection? And what do you do to start with strengths, or if you do anything with coping in your space, to help each other plant the seeds? So let's just take a moment to share maybe some things that you're already doing, again, with the ideas of connection and strength. And then we can learn with and from each other as we end here today. I'll put the prompt in the chat in case I'm talking too much. Okay. All right. I'm going to invite folks to add their ideas to the chat, so that we can learn from each other, jot down some ideas of things that other people do, knowing that I'm definitely not the expert on every single possible way to be trauma informed. Lots of ways to think about it. Awesome. So building on student interest, checking in with students verbally and or in writing. Love that. The check-in is so simple. I just was conducting a focus group with students who were middle schoolers, and they said, our teachers think that we don't want to talk to them, but we actually just want them to start talking to us first. And I thought that was really profound, that kids do want to connect with adults, but it's not cool for them to be the ones to initiate it in middle school. So I thought that was really an interesting way to think about it. Yeah. Okay. So breakfast every morning, just some chit chat. They can share freely. Anything they want to say, get a fun, quick share early in the morning. Oh, I love it. It's unstructured. It's safe. It's, an easy time to just be with kids, right? Connecting the classroom and parent caregivers. Love that. Yeah, that's great. Where the student is, ask questions, uncover their strengths. Oh, that's beautiful. That's so important. Yeah. Sometimes we do have to help kids see the inherent good in them, right? Awesome. All right. Well, with that, we've got about 2 minutes left, and I would just love to hear from you. I'd just love to know, as you're exiting this space today, and I do invite you to check out the chat to see what others are saying, working with the younger ones, putting up feeling charts, talking about expressing feelings to learn from each other. Awesome. I'd love to know from you, what is one thing that you're taking away from today's session? And if you're having an issue with the chat, you're welcome to put it in the Q&A as well. But would love to know just maybe one thing you learned, an aha, or maybe something that you needed to be reminded of when we're thinking about trauma in schools. So we've got about 1 minute left. I invite you just to drop your one learning in the chat. Thank you all for being here with me today. I'd love to continue staying in touch. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Duane, and I have my email here as well. If you want additional resources or supports thinking about these things, please just send me an email and I'd happily get in touch with you. All right. Thanks, everyone. Would love to hear you just drop in the chat. What's one thing you're taking away from today's session as we head out? Yeah, I'm realizing the chat is going sometimes to just the hosts and the panelists. So you may not be seeing all these, but I'll do my best to read them out loud. Yes. So feeling safe in schools is so important. Thinking about assets and building on strengths. Yes, yes, yes. Helping students build on their own assets as well. Thank you. Awesome. So glad that this was helpful. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you all being here. I think that's that. If you have a final thought, drop it in the chat. Otherwise, have a great rest of the conference and really grateful for you joining today. Not connecting the child with trauma. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Addison, Duane. We really appreciate your time and presentation here today and your support for the Center to close the opportunity gap.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Afternoon, everyone. You still have an opportunity to win raffle prizes. So hold on. And we're going to also raffle off golf cart rides. Not that we're not all physically active and fit to walk to the parking lot, but we also know some of you might get lost. And so we'll be raffling off those names for golf cart rides after our Ed Talk. So thank you for staying with us. We are excited to introduce our afternoon Ed Talk speaker. And so I want to say something about Jonathan Winn. And I also want to give a special thank you to Tim Allen from the Carlson Family Foundation. He's amazing year after year in nominating enthusiastically these incredible teachers and educators and people who just inspire and challenge us. So thank you. And Tim Allen's here today with us in person. All right. So a little bit about Jonathan Winn. Jonathan has been teaching high school mathematics in San Diego for the last 20 years. He has taught every course from pre-algebra up through advanced placement calculus. In 2011, he was named Teacher of the Year for the entire San Diego Unified School District. That same year, Jonathan received the Outstanding Teachers of America Award by the Carlson Family Foundation, now known as Above and Beyond Teaching. Jonathan mentors dozens of teachers every year, teaches a math methods course at Cal Poly Humboldt, and runs a teacher leadership academy in his spare time. For more information, please visit abovebeyond.org. And we're grateful that Jonathan's with us in person. And the title of his Ed Talk is From Misery to Magic, One Teacher's Journey to Joy. Help me welcome Jonathan Winn.
Hey, everybody. Hang on. Oh, is it on? You can hear it? You can hear me? Yeah? Okay. All right. Hi. Start my stopwatch. And go. All right. Thanks for being here. I'm really glad to be here. It's so nice to see so many smiling faces and awesome teachers. A little bit about myself. I'm a high school teacher in San Diego and have been for 20 years. This is my 20th year. I just started teaching math methods class at Cal Poly Humboldt. I'm really excited to pass on, all the knowledge and stuff I've gained over the years to the next generation. I've been mentoring student teachers, intern teachers, and doing induction through San Diego County Office of Ed for quite some time now. And then it was mentioned also that I helped to run a teacher leadership academy, which I'm going to invite
any and all of you high school teachers and middle school in the audience. Oh, there we go. Now I hear it. Unfortunately, it's a high school, middle school thing only, but we're working on the elementary piece, so we'll get there. So that's who I am. Thanks for being here. This is my story to finding joy in the classroom. And before we get started, I wanted to start like my friend Jason did with a little movement activity. And so I'm going to ask you when you know that it's your time to please stand up. If you have been teaching for 5 years or less, will you please stand up? And let's give these folks a round of applause. Thank you for joining the team. We need you. All right, you can be seated. How about 5 to 10 years? Please stand up. All right, give them a round of applause. Awesome. 11 to 20. That's me. Yeah. All right. Thank you. 21 to 30. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah. All right. All right. And any 40 plus in education? All right. All right. We got one. We got one. Yeah. All right. There we go. Awesome. Okay. One more activity before we get started. This is going to help you warm up your vocal cords. We're going to do a little vocal activity. So this first one, you're gonna scream if you know it's you. If I'm talking about you, okay? If you feel complete joy in the classroom, you love going into school every day, you don't want to leave at the end of the day, class is an absolute joy all day, you are excited and thrilled, I want you to yell like that guy right now. All right, all right, all right, nice, okay. This is also an honesty check too. Be real. Okay, next one. If you do feel some joy, you feel occasional joy, you have moments of joy, but obviously, you know, it's not all joyous. There's frustrations, whatever, you know, maybe admin stuff, student stuff. Give me more of like a, yeah. Okay, that might be the majority. That might be the majority. All right. And then finally, if you are like I was, miserable, if you are like, and I'm talking, you know, in the morning, the alarm goes off and you're wondering, I mean, do I want to go in today? Should I call? Do I have a legit excuse to call in again? How am I going to get through fifth period? You know, and I want you to be honest. If you feel like I'm not feeling a whole lot of joy, maybe that's why you came here today. Could you give me a groan? Okay, here's what a groan sounds like. It would be like this. Anybody? Okay, I heard a little. Okay. I kind of want to just get a sense of who's out here today. So thank you for your participation. That I think I got a little idea. The focus of this talk today is going to be on joy in teaching. Because what I found was once I was able to find joy in teaching, my students found a lot more joy in learning. So that's kind of the angle I'm taking here, just to give you an idea. You can go ahead and click that button. Okay, yeah, that's me in the middle. That was year 2. That was my second. I couldn't find my year 1 teacher, but that was my year 2 teacher picture, and then a bunch of pictures of my kids up there. So as an early career teacher, there was very little joy in teaching. I dreaded going in. I absolutely hated it. I couldn't wait until I got out of there. I was completely unsuccessful. That's why I hated it. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. I completely underestimated how hard teaching was going to be. I had little to no support from my school team, my administrator, my department, district. I was out in a bungalow, way out in the far reaches of Bell Junior High in National City. And it was hot and there was no air conditioning and nobody wanted to be there. And I absolutely dreaded it. If you could hit that button, some descriptors are going to begin to show up on the screen. There was rampant student apathy, major behavior problems, lots of like attendance and tardiness issues. Kids didn't want to be in my class, and I don't even think they really wanted to be at our school. Very poor quality of work or completion of work. Very high numbers of failing students, no sense of classroom community, low exam grades, and you know, the overarching thing was that I felt like a complete failure. I mean, I had like been training to do this for years, and college and I was imagining myself as a teacher and I was imagining going in and the kids all liking me and I was imagining being funny and them laughing. And it was not that at all. It was like the exact opposite. And I hated going into school. I mean, to the point that I got a jury summons and I thought to myself, I thought maybe I could get on this jury. And I am not kidding. And I went in there and I was even keel, you know, I was not trying to like show anything like you want to pick me. I'm just level headed. And they picked me and it was 14 days. And I felt like I hit the lottery because I didn't even have to burn any sick time. I got to be out of school for that. I mean, that's how bad it was. If if that doesn't describe it enough. So nobody seemed to know or care. They would come in and do my style evaluation. And it was the only time the principal or vice principal came in and, you know, their comments were like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. You could probably work on this, that, or the other. All right, that's it. And that was it. That was all I had. And I was thinking, are you nuts? Granted, my kids acted a little better when the VP came in. I probably should have had them act like normal. I just didn't want to get in trouble. So anywho, I ended up after my second year, I couldn't take it anymore. I quit. I didn't know what to do. I thought I was like losing my mind. I was, you know, I just didn't know what to do. So after I quit, I was trying to figure out, you know, what am I going to do with my life? I thought I was going to be a teacher. Now I don't know. So I just got some odd jobs here and there. I remember working in a thrift store at one point while I was trying to figure out what to do, but it doesn't pay that well in a thrift store. So I thought, man, I have all this like training and education. I should try to do something in education. So, and I was a bit bothered by my failure too. I felt like, come on, I could do this. So anyways, I ended up subbing because subbing was kind of a good gig. You know, you could make $150 a day, paid better than the thrift store. And so I ended up subbing in a lot of different schools around San Diego. I kind of wanted to see what all the different schools were like. Maybe I could find a good one or something. And I walked into a school one day called Crawford High School. And if any of you know San Diego or you know Crawford has some reputations. At that particular time, Crawford was the lowest performing school in San Diego by all the test scores and grad rates and all that data stuff. But I sat in for a staff meeting and I was looking up at the numbers and they had unusually high scores in algebra. Like everything was the bottom of the barrel, but algebra was like the top of the barrel. And I turned to the person next to me and was like, am I seeing this right? Like that looks really good to me. And he said, yeah, that's Mr. Munn's class. You should go check him out. So I decided I got to see this for myself. All right. So go ahead and hit that button. So there's Mr. Munn, second in from the left. And he just seemed like a pretty normal guy. And I was waiting to see, oh, this is going to be magic. I can't imagine what this guy does. How does he? Because it was the same class I had been teaching at Bell. It was algebra for kids who were like redoing algebras, algebra remediation. Somehow he was getting kids to be engaged and they loved his class and they spoke so highly of him. And so I went in there and I just started observing and I saw so many things that I had not been doing before. No one ever told me to do. And they were simple things, actually. Like he would do this thing with the kids where he trained them, where he would just go, eyes on me. And they all stopped what they were doing and they listened. It was like amazing. So it seems it's so simple, right? So anyways, the things he did, they were far reaching and that's a whole other presentation. But the point is I was amazed and I thought, I could do that. So they needed a geometry teacher for the next year and they asked me if I would do it. And I was really nervous because I'd already quit once and I was kind of scared of being miserable again. But I told them, I will do it, but I may quit. So I'm going to just tell you that up front. I'm going to be honest with you up front because I will quit. I've done it before. I never did it in the middle of the year before because that's kind of a big no-no. If you sign on, you got to go all the way. You don't want to leave those kids hanging, but I was just real with them. And so they said, yeah. And I decided in my brain, I'm going to copy this guy. Like literally, I'm going to do the eyes on me and I'm going to copy everything he does, the way he does his class, the worksheets, everything. And I told him this too. I'm like, if you want me, you have to tell me everything and coach me through everything. And he was like, yeah, I'll do that. So the school agreed. He agreed. I copied him. And it worked. It was like magic. I mean, I could not believe it. I mean, it was like so simple, but he just had all these proven techniques that, you know, he was a much more experienced teacher than me. So I became a much better teacher. I actually won the Teacher of the Year award for my school site that year, like the first year. Copying. So I found joy. Like all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is what I was imagining. Like the kids, like they like me and like they like coming to class, and I tell them to do something and they do it. And I'm like, this is awesome. And it was all because of this guy. And so I wanted more. Like I became kind of hooked on mentors. Like who else is out there? What else can I learn? So I started looking at my school and there was nobody. Like I went in, I watched other teachers, and it was like really depressing. I couldn't get anything. And there were maybe 10 teachers in the school. And it turns out, I don't know. I'm biased, I guess, a little bit, but like math, it's hard to find good math teachers. I don't know. That just seems to be my experience. So I searched around the school district of San Diego, the whole district, and I managed to find this lady, Becky Breedlove, from some folks that I had. Oh, you got to go talk to Becky Breedlove. So then I went and I talked to her and I watched her and I learned so much from her. A lot of the things I learned from these folks are down at the bottom there. But then I kind of exhausted. I couldn't find another teacher that I had heard of, that I knew of after, reaching out and asking people, investigating on my own, looking up school demographics, looking up student performance data, all that stuff. So I started going beyond my school, beyond San Diego. I turned to Google and I started Googling people. Well, if you're a math teacher, and even if you're not, but most math teachers know Jaime Escalante, legendary math teacher. And so I was, give it up for Escalante. I was reading all his stuff. He had all kinds of good stuff out there about his math program and the team approach. And there's a lot of good videos of him. And then I happened to see that he was coming to San Diego. He was going to give a talk at Hilltop High School. So I got to go to that. So I went down to Hilltop High School and I listened to his talk and I got in line to meet him like everybody else to get their picture taken. And I got to the back of the line on purpose so I could be last. And I talked to him last. And so I got a little extra time with him, about 10, 15 minutes, and I was asking him all kinds of questions, and he was telling me things, but I'll never forget. I just want to say it today. I was like, Mr. Escalante, I'm teaching calculus now to my students. What is the secret? Because, he was the famous calculus teacher, got all the kids to pass that test. And he leaned in, and he was pretty old at the time. He leaned in, and he said, fractions. They got to know their fractions. And I just held on to that forever. I told my kids that story. So then I Googled further and I found this guy, news stories written about this guy, Sudhir Karandikar, up at a similar school to Crawford up in the San Jose area. And I looked him up on the school website, sent him an email. Hey there, Mr. Karandikar, I found you on Google. You sound like a great calculus teacher. Could I come talk to you this summer? So he invited me up to his house. I drove up to San Jose on my summer break. He let me spend the night. We spent a whole day in a coffee shop. I slept in his kid's bed. Not with the kid, but the kid was gone. And anyways, he did so much for me in helping me understand how to build out the curriculum that I was teaching. Like he was a master calculus teacher. And so I just learned so much about how to structure the units and how to do these topics here and those topics there. And our results just like took off from there. So these were the mentors that led me in my journey. And when I became a successful teacher, it's all because of them. I just copied them. So all the things I'm telling you today, I'm not special. I didn't come up with this stuff. I'm just copying people. And I honestly think that's the mark of a great teacher. You find those things that really do work and you check your ego and you just copy them. You don't need to invent it. The path is well known. We just have to find the people. The path is out there, but you got to find the people, the secret helpers, so to speak. All right, go ahead and send that next one. We're going to take a quick look at how sweet it can be.
It's 7:15 a.m. at Crawford High School. Welcome to Mr. Winn's Advanced Calculus class. Good morning, Calculus! Good morning! It's a class so popular and diverse, it can't be confined to a single classroom or taught in a conventional method.
Is that our best one? Yeah. Really? Okay, I thought it was pretty good. 7 easy steps. Step by step goes the marching band. Dang it, I keep putting that down. There. Step 1, you already know it.
Write what you know.
Let's do this.
You, ever since your father died when you were 6, you doing the things with the numbers all the time on the pieces of paper.
Oh, Mother, be quiet.
Oh.
They were to take their AP calculus exam. And then afterward, that was the big like congratulatory photo. You know, the whole team's together. We got the uniform on and everybody's just hugging. That was like the after the test moment. You can go to the next one. So, I mean, I hope that video helped to encapsulate how sweet it can be. I mean, that was what I always imagined it could be like when I was, you know, prepping to become a teacher. So hopefully you've already picked up on where this is going. I mean, how this all happened for me were the people who showed me the way, okay? Finding good mentors. And I define a good mentor specifically as someone who must have demonstrated success, and that's not just test scores. I mean, I think student opinion, honestly, is like one of the best, you know, student surveys, but demonstrated success with similar student demographics. I found that if I took teaching strategies from a teacher at some other school that didn't look anything like Crawford, it didn't work. Like it has to be a similar school. This is just my experience. I'm just, you know, let you know how it worked for me. So I would recommend, number one, check your school site. You know, same content area. It really does make a difference. I mean, I met some great English teachers, but I don't know. We just do things a certain way. In math, it just doesn't translate. You guys with your Socratic seminars, I don't know. I don't know. All right. So anyway, and observe them regularly. Find those teachers if you can on your site and observe them correctly. I had Mr. Munn. That was the only one, but that's all I needed. You really only need one. Number two, you go outside of your school and you start looking in your district, in your county. And I would start by trying to identify similar schools. So I would do this. You go to the CDE's DataQuest website and you can just look up all the different, you know, numbers about a school. You can look up the ethnicity breakdown. You can look up English learner percentages. You can look up all kinds of things, socioeconomics. Try to get a snapshot of schools that are similar. It doesn't have to be exact, but similar to your schools. For Crawford, it's like Hoover and Lincoln and Kearney and Madison a little bit. These are the schools that are kind of similar to Crawford. And then contact the principal. Just hit up the principal and say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm a teacher. I'm trying to get better at my craft. Could you point me in the direction of a couple of great math teachers at your school? And then contact those teachers and go and observe them. Then extend your search out to the interwebs and see what's out there on the internet, specifically maybe any news stories that were written about an awesome teacher. And if you find them, like I did with Mr. Karandikar, look them up on their school website, pull their email address, send them an email, and see if they'll invite you up to stay at their house and talk for a whole day. You'd be amazed. They will. They love hearing from you. And then finally, this is the Teacher Leadership Academy I was telling you about a little bit at the beginning. The Above and Beyond Teacher Leadership Academy. We have mentoring from award-winning teachers. Jason Morgan is one of those teachers. He was honored. Jose Rivas, who was doing one of the breakouts, is another one of those teachers. So there's some amazing teachers, and they provide a one-on-one mentoring, one session a month for the whole year. They host webinars, 1 or 2 a month for the whole year. And then we have an entire summer institute that's 3 days long. And the whole thing's free because it's funded by very generous donations from the Sun Foundation. I think they're kind of up in this area, actually. But the deadline's this Sunday. But I want to let you know, okay? And you can apply right on the website abovebeyond.org. But I got to let you know, again, it is middle school and high school. And we are primarily targeting early career teachers in years 2 to 5. But just this year, we're actually expanding the program to provide support for teachers who are beyond their early career. So whatever point you are in your career, if you're a middle school or high school teacher and you're like, yeah, that sounds interesting to me, I would like to get, a mentor and talk to them about strategies and how I can improve. Go to that website. You'll just see it. It says Teacher Leadership Academy. Just click on it. It says apply. Just put your info in there and you'll be hearing from me. Once you find a good mentor, it's down there at the bottom. Just copy. All right. You can go ahead and go to the last slide. Thanks very much for your excellent attention and participation here today. If you'd like to reach out, my info's up there, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for bringing that high energy to the end of our day. We needed that. Awesome. Well, I just want to wrap up our day together. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. We hope you got to engage in some rich discussions, that you have some ideas to start the school year. Maybe you made some new friends while you were here. And we really hope you are ready to bring joy back to teaching and learning. We want to thank our organizing committee again, Dr. Nat Hansuvada, Stephanie Kakuta, Crystal Majori, and Cassidy McCoy, and our student volunteers. I really want to thank our EdTalk speakers, Jason and Jonathan today. You both were amazing. We're so grateful, so grateful. All our breakout session facilitators, I know you all were amazing, and we're so grateful to you. And Goldie Muhammad, will give her a shout out. I mean, she's amazing. I don't know how she commands such presence virtually. It's just like blows my mind. She's amazing. And thank you to all of you for being here on a Friday in July. And most importantly, for doing all the good work you do every single day for the children of California. Thank you all so much. Yay. We hope you stay connected with the CCOG. We have our webinars, our website. We'll also be launching our clearinghouse of best practices to close the opportunity gap this fall. So that'll be up and running. And really the next step is lunch, which is out on the courtyard. There's 2 lines. So when you go, you can take either side and you can exit through these doors and then straight out to the courtyard. So thank you again so much, and go enjoy your lunch and the networking. We have the courtyard all the rest of the day, so you can just be out there as long as you want. Thank you all.